I am here to tell you that you can make a sourdough starter with no measurements, no discards, and no feedings. Yes, you can, and I'll show you my method. If you're new to my channel, my name is Anya, and I love sharing our heritage homemaking made simple journey, and I can totally geek out about sourdough all day long. And as I was preparing for this video, I was trying to remember when I actually made my first sourdough starter. Now, I grew up watching my mom make hers and bake breads and all that thing, but actually for me to make my own, and I think it was in 1992 when I was still living in Germany. And the sourdough starters that I have today, I have two, are not the original sourdough starters from Germany because of this simple method. I don't need to actually bring one, and I didn't understand the value of having a heritage heirloom, super old, however many decades or centuries old sourdough starter. But this is a really easy method to make your own, which I'm going to show you right now. As I said, there's no measurements. So what you'll do is you take a jar, and it is really important that this jar is clean. By clean, I don't necessarily mean sterilized and bleached and all of this, but I mean like clean and no soap residue, because soap residue can sometimes lead to mold growth. So you want to start with a clean container. I always like glass because then I can see what's going on inside. You can also use a ceramic container. Here I have some flour, and you can use any flour really. However, I find that the best flour to use is at least unbleached all-purpose flour. I will tell you that organic unbleached will work even better. Whole wheat organic will work better because there is much more activity on the whole grain, the wild yeasts that you are capturing and that are still on the outer layer of the grain that is still in the whole grain. And rye flour works particularly well. However, I have here unbleached white organic flour. Then I have some water, and again, water can be important. I recommend you use distilled water or filtered. For many people, their tap water has chlorine added to it, and chlorine is really good at killing unwanted organisms, but that also works against us when we're trying to make a sourdough starter. So if you don't have a filter, or if you don't have access to distilled water, what you can do is you can boil your water on the stove for a few minutes and then let it cool down. Remember, you don't want to use hot water, you want to use room temperature or lukewarm water at best. Now, here are my ingredients that are different from every other pretty much sourdough starter method out there, and that is that I am using buttermilk. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what if you don't have buttermilk, what if you have a dairy intolerance, lactose intolerance, and so forth. However, this is buttermilk, and I'm not talking about the milk that is the result of your butter making process. That may work, but what we're really looking for is the cultured. So it has life active cultures in it. And then my last little bit here is it still has my German labeling here in the front, and on the back it says caraway seeds. Caraway seeds is a kind of like a secret tip that my mom tends to remind me of when I make a sourdough starter. It's not really getting very active, and she's like, have you put caraway seeds in it? And unfortunately, I have done a lot of Googling and researching and trying to find why caraway seeds may make a difference in your sourdough starter making, and unfortunately, I have not been able to find anything. If you know anything about caraway seeds and you have any idea why that could help our fermentation process, please leave me a comment in the comment section below this video, but I will add the caraway seeds. Now, if you are thinking right now, I don't like caraway seeds, I don't like the taste of them, let me tell you a few things about the caraway seeds. First of all, we only need very few. And because you will be making a starter that will sit over many days, probably as much as 5, maybe as much as 10 days, The caraway seeds are going to kind of quell up a little bit and lose their potency. If you don't like them at all, don't use them. If you're like, I hate caraway seeds, I can't stand the taste of them, don't use them. You will probably still make a very fine starter. You can also try, if you're just adding a few, trying to scoop them out. And then depending on how you're going to use your starter in your first baking, let's say you bake a bread, it is very likely that the caraway seeds are going to disappear in the big loaf of bread and you won't even taste them at all. So I encourage you, if you have tried sourdough starters and you haven't had any luck, give the caraway seeds a try. Now, I told you that we're not using any, I have hair here or something. We're not using any measurements, so I'm going to give my buttermilk a bit of a shake and simply pour some buttermilk in here, maybe half of this 16-ounce mason jar. Then I will add my flour, and I have here, maybe that's half a cup. I'm pretty bad at eyeballing. Maybe it's half a cup. Trying to get it all in here without spilling it. And I will sprinkle just a few caraway seeds on top. This is a little bit much. I want to prove to you that even this is too much. So maybe just like so. What is that? Maybe 1/8 of a tablespoon? Teaspoon, not tablespoon. Like I told you, no measurements. And I'll give this a stir with a wooden spoon. Now at this stage, a metal fork or a silver fork is really not going to hurt, or a spoon is not going to hurt your sourdough starter. I just so happened to create a consistency that I like. If yours comes out a little thicker or you have much more flour in it, you can add a little bit more water, and I'll just do that for just this video here. Even though it's going to be a little runnier than I like it. So here is the consistency. Usually I recommend going for a thick pancake batter like consistency. So that's really the most accurate way I can describe it. And stirring is always a good idea because you also want to capture wild yeasts from the air, and the more you stir it, first of all, you're aerating it, you're increasing the oxygen in there, but then also you're bringing in wild yeasts from your kitchen. So this is really all you do. You mix this up and you set it out at room temperature. I like to cover it. I have a beeswax wrap. I like to make my own, and you can find the link for the video in the box below this video or right up here. But you can also use a not very tight fitting lid. I want there to be some air exchange. You can use a paper towel or you can use a coffee filter. And I like to, just because my beeswax wraps get a lot of use and sometimes they're not quite as sticky anymore, I like to put a rubber band around it, and then all I do is I set it in a warm spot. Now, in our kitchen, and this is at the beginning of April when this video is coming out, we're just at the end of winter, but I have made sourdough starters in the winter in our kitchen that does not have a heat source. And our thermostat is set very low. It's about 68 degrees on most days. So during the winter, I doubt that our kitchen is much warmer than 68 degrees at most. And at night, it could even be as low as 52 or something degrees Fahrenheit. A temperature of 70 to 73 degrees Fahrenheit is ideal, but do not be dismayed if you don't have that. You can always find a sunny windowsill where the sourdough gets at least some warmth throughout the day, or you can find another spot in your home where there is a heater vent or some other heat source, or you can have it close to your stove. Just remember to not have it too close because you don't want to kill anything in there with too much heat, but the ambient heat from your stove might also be a really good thing. And then all you do is every day or every other day. There's really no hard and fast rule. You take the lid off, you look at it, you stir it a little bit, aerate it, and marvel at it, give it some good thoughts, and then put it back in its spot. And after a few days, you should have a slightly sour smell in there. And then continue putting it out there, and you can sometimes, if it gets a little too thick because for some reason the flour has quelled up a little bit, you can add a little bit of water to it. If you find that you get a brown liquid on top, or like it's called hooch, it is when it separates, and oftentimes that is a sign that there's maybe not enough flour in it. What you can do is add just a little bit more flour into it, but that may not even be necessary if you just stir it in. And just watch it. I can't tell you how many days it's going to take, but I'm pretty certain that you will end up with a nice, beautiful, active, healthy starter. And how do you know that you have a healthy starter? First of all, I always like to tap on the bottom and listen to the sound. When it sounds hollow, then that gives me a good indication. And then just by looking at it, when you have a lot of bubbles and you can look in there and you see a lot of bubbles on the surface, that is a very good indication. Next to smelling your sourdough starter, it should be a pleasant, sour smell. It shouldn't have an off smell or no smell at all. And then lastly, I often do this. I take my spoon and I just taste a very little bit. It should be slightly fizzy and effervescent, because that's the carbonation from the good bacteria doing their job in here. And that's really all you need to do. And if you're not quite sure for your first baking, let's say you want to bake a bread, what I often do is I add just a little bit of yeast to my bread recipe, sort of like an insurance that the bread will get a good rise, because a young starter may not be quite as active and robust as an older starter. Some purists have said, well, then, you know, yeast is not really, it's not the, what do you say, the sourdough aficionado's way to do it. However, yeast is part of your sourdough overall content of good bacteria. So adding just a little bit of commercial yeast to me doesn't feel like cheating. It's kind of making things a little bit easy, and why not? If all of this sounds a little bit too complicated, and in the beginning it may actually, because it is unfamiliar and there are some steps that you haven't done before, I have taken all the guesswork out of it in my online sourdough course to show you step by step and really in easy short modules what you're looking for, substitutions, pitfalls, problems, what if you get mold, what if it doesn't get active. In my sourdough course, you get access to me directly through my private Facebook group when you enroll. I have told you in the beginning that if you don't have buttermilk, or if for any reason you don't like to use dairy, well, let's first talk about buttermilk. You can also use yogurt. Yogurt will be a little bit thicker, so I recommend that you add a little bit more water to it, and you can also use kefir. Basically, we're jump starting our starter. Again, those are dairy products. If you don't want to use any dairy, you can use kombucha. And in all of these dairy products and the kombucha, it is really important that you don't use anything with flavorings. This one is a plain kombucha. It's a little bit harder to find. If you make your own and you don't add any flavors to it or any fruit or something like that, then you have a plain kombucha, but this works just as well. Once you have your starter, I have another method that does not require any discards or any feedings for maintaining your starter. And the video is right here. You can watch that and see that it's very simple. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.